Well, hello, you're back for more, apparently. Welcome back to my classroom. Today we're going to be talking about elements of lit. So this video is a continuation of everything that has come before it. So if you guys can see right here on my little notebook, we have already covered elements of literature as far as the introduction. We've already covered basic definitions. We've made an elements reference guide. We also updated our table of contents. Talked about plot, and then talked about some plot. So yeah, went ahead and finished that up. So with that said, we are going to move on to the next segment. Go us. So if you guys are keeping up with this video series, then you know that the next thing we have to address is going to be setting. Okay, so this section is going to be rather short. So if you guys are already working on your notebooks, it's going to be a piece of cake for you. Okay, previously on our little magical PowerPoint here, we were talking about the different ways to track a plot. All right, just to give you a lightning fast review. So with our plot summary, we went over different plot charts, as you guys can see. We talked about Inception, talked about Cloud Atlas, like all these amazing books that are right over here that you can find below in the recommendations section for plot. We also went over custom plot charts, things like Memento, talked about Little Women, whatever. Okay. With this new section, we're going to be talking about setting, okay? So we're going to have to set up our notebook here. Now, for me, I have about this much room. I have about this much room at the bottom of the page. I actually could put all of my information there, and just to keep things nice and clean, I'm going to do that. If you wanted to flip to a new page, you totally could. Wouldn't be a big deal. Now, for me personally, I don't like it when students draw like a big old line across the page, because usually they're like, and they do like a huge squiggly line. I think it's a lot cleaner if you just do a thick line over here to indicate a section break. Again, that's just me. You don't have to do it that way. All right. You don't even have to highlight this stuff. You can, that's the beauty of this notebook. You can do it any way you want. I'm basically like Bob Ross right now. Okay. So setting. Setting is a piece of cake. So right here on my PowerPoint, I have a really, really basic definition for you. Setting is going to be the time and place of the story. So time/location. That's it. You're done. It's just that easy. I'm just kidding. Okay. There are actually two different kinds of setting that you're going to find within a modern story. That is a stated setting. And you're also going to have an implied setting. So when I was talking about this stuff with my students today, I brought up a bunch of shows and movies because that's the easiest way to get all this stuff across. All right. If you ever had a childhood and you ever watched the show The Powerpuff Girls or Dexter's Lab or Samurai Jack, then you really, really know what a stated setting is. A stated setting is going to be where the author directly tells you the time and place. So author directly tells you, or directly reveals, whatever you want to say, time and place. So the reason why I bring up the Powerpuff Girls is because that is a fantastic cartoon where almost every single episode starts with, "In the city of Townsville," and then the story unfolds. So if you guys remember that cartoon at all, because you watched it, because you had a childhood, which, proud of you, good job. Okay, if you've ever seen that show, then you were seeing a stated setting all the time. All right, the next kind of setting that you're going to have is called implied. Now, the way that I demonstrated this to my students is that an implication, or to imply something, is to say one thing, but you're also saying something else with the same statement. So if you guys have ever seen Mean Girls, or if you've just experienced the average drama that is teenage life, you've probably experienced this before. But imagine a teenager who looks at another teenager and they're like, "Oh my God, I love your outfit. It's so great." Now that sounds like a compliment, but on the other hand, they're also saying like, "Wow, I really hate you." Sometimes teenagers do that to each other, and it's terrible, but that is a thing. So they are implying something else when they compliment you. Compliment, right? That's the best way to explain what an implication is, at least to me. So An implication is where you are saying one thing but also saying something else. Now, this means that an author, for setting anyway, this means that an author is hiding. An author is hiding time and place. Or it's obscure, or like the setting of the story may be not easily revealed. This requires reader analysis. So this requires the reader to put in just a little bit of thinking in order to figure out what's going on. Now, the example that I give in my classroom is pretty straightforward, but I also introduce a bunch of authors, and I just like to gush about literature in general, so I'm going to quickly do the same thing here. So if you take a look at my screen, I'm going to put it up over there. Today we talked about a bunch of different authors that exist. So this guy in particular is Clive Barker, but we're not going to get to him yet. We're not going to get to these characters yet either. Okay, so everyone probably knows who Edgar Allan Poe is. Edgar Allan Poe is a famous author who had like a miserable life. Yeah, go him. Okay, there's another author that we could talk about who is Franz Kafka. Franz Kafka is a famous author who had a miserable life and wrote some really good stories and whatever, right? Well, Edgar Allan Poe and Franz Kafka are well known for like horror stories or depressing stories or whatever word you want to use to describe them. Most students also know this person, who is Stephen King. Stephen King is like the granddaddy of horror that exists right now, right? There are other authors to consider as well, such as Clive Barker, who is really, really famous for his stuff, and Junji Ito, who is this man right here. Junji Ito is basically the Stephen King of Japan. He is probably one of the most legendary horror writers to ever exist. So, at least I love his stuff. Now, this guy right here, H.P. Lovecraft, is another really famous horror writer. And he's really famous for creating cosmic horror. Cosmic horror is all about like these giant monsters that exist in the cosmos, and they mentally torture human beings and cause them misery and things like that. If you guys have ever heard of Cthulhu is a creation by H.P. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft's stuff is not normally taught in schools, however, because it's so crazy out there that most kids would just go crazy by reading it. It's not actually true. Most kids would just be bored because a lot of his stuff is really lengthy and whatever. Also, H.P. Lovecraft was like horribly racist, so, there's that whole thing. But sometimes you just have to separate the art from the artist, and that's just how life is. So, what does any of that have to do with setting? Well, I have a little challenge that I gave my students today, and that was to tell me what this setting is. So here is a little sample from H.P. Lovecraft on a short story, and it goes like this. The stones in the crumbling corridors seemed always hideously damp, and there was an accursed smell everywhere, as of the piled-up corpses of dead generations. It was never light, so that I used sometimes to light candles and gaze steadily at them for relief. Nor was there any sun outdoors, since the terrible trees grew high above the topmost accessible tower. There was one black tower which reached above the trees into the unknown outer sky, but that was partly ruined, and could not be ascended save by a well-nigh impossible climb up the sheer wall, stone by stone. I must have lived years in this place, but I cannot measure the time. So the challenge here is to figure out, is this a stated setting or an implied setting? Now, some of my students today had a real debate over what this actually was, because I guess you could really make an argument for both sides, right? But for the most part, this is an implied setting, okay? Now, to understand, you're not literally told, once upon a time in the town of, you're not really told that information. So as a reader, you have to go through certain steps to try and figure out what is actually being said here, all right? So I'm going to say that this is an implied setting. Wonderful, okay? For this, though, think about what are the clues that you are getting as a reader that make you understand that this is a proper setting. What are the clues that you see? So I would give my students some time to go through this, but I'll just kind of jump through it, right? What does the outside look like? Can you close your eyes and imagine this scene? Well, you can if you just pay attention to the clues. So it's hideously damp, okay? There's a bad smell. You know that outside it's never light. And you know that there are windows in this place where, you know, where we are, right? Nor was there sun outdoors, okay? Then there are terrible trees that grow high above the towers that are here. And you know that one of the towers is made of stone, right? And it has sheer walls, all right? So if you put all those clues together, you know, as the reader, most people would be like, oh, okay, this must be some kind of castle, because castles smell bad and they can be damp, and, you know, it's in a forest, right? That's exactly what happened in this story. You are presented with a castle. So, and if you're in my class, I kind of summarize the rest of the story, but for the most part, that kind of gets it across. This is an implied setting, and you have to do just a little bit of thinking just to figure out what it means. So that's pretty much it. With that said, setting is done. Good. If you're continuing on this series of notes, I'm going to do characters next, and characters are going to be on a brand new page because there's a lot of information there. And thank you for watching. Don't forget that down below, not down below here, but down below this video, if that makes any sense, you'll see recommendations and all the notes that we took and things like that. All right, that's pretty much it, man. Good luck on the rest of the elements. I wish you luck.